Welcome to Rio with Rios, Sueños to Success podcast, where we explore the inner lives of thinkers, leaders, and change makers. I'm your host, Dr. Victor Rios. Today's episode is a true honor. Our guest is a Pulitzer Prize winning historian, a scholar of Black identity and liberation, and someone whose work invites us to reflect not only on history, but the soul of history itself. I've had the honor to work with him as professors and friends at UC Santa Barbara. And just so we're very clear with my audience, being honored with a Pulitzer Prize, it's a big deal. It means you have created outstanding work in journalism, literature, music, or photography, and it's made a significant impact in the world. It's one of the most prestigious awards in the United States, recognizing individuals who tell important stories, expose truths, or produce powerful creative work that helps better understand the world. Winning a Pulitzer Prize shows that your work is not only high quality, but also meaningful and influential on a larger scale. I've had the honor of being advised, being mentored and guided during difficult times as an intellectual, as a scholar, as a professor by Dr. Jeffrey Stewart here. So please help me welcome the brilliant and deeply reflective Dr. Jeffrey Stewart. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Victor, or Dr. Rios.
Let's
Yeah. You are the doctor because you operating, brother.
Oh, thank you.
You've been doing a great job at UCSB in difficult times. Those difficult times going all the way back to the pandemic, when we were surveying Black students in particular about how they were coping with the pandemic, and we found out that they had a whole lot of other issues about how they were treated on campus, which led, I think, to a number of interventions that you've made and we've been able to make. So we're still struggling now, obviously with difficult times, but I just appreciate the solidarity that you've been with me all these long years.
Well, thank you. I mean, going back to the pandemic and those times, I remember we put together a webinar because that's all we could do. We couldn't come together in person, and it was to try to understand what Black students were going through on the campus community. And I remember we just wanted to hear their voice. And when you put a platform up for people to hear their voice, you find insight that you couldn't find no other way. So I remember, man, I hearing the students tell stories. One student told a story about some lady chasing her across campus with a broomstick, calling her the N-word. She had never really, been heard telling that story. We heard other students talk about just their fear of walking around campus and feeling unsafe, not just from potential victimization, but they were talking about feeling unsafe where, they were being harassed by police officers. And, of course, we heard voices of students saying that, they didn't have enough professors that could kind of be there to guide them, that resonated with their stories. And ever since, as a university community, we've been able to, try our best, right, to bring in more voices and more people that speak to students. And we got a lot of work to do. But I feel like with you there, with other incredible professors that have come around, I feel like students are in good hands. And, I wanted to kind of maybe start with your own journey. You're at a university, you're a professor there. Did you always know you were going to be a professor growing up?
No. I think the main thing, to be honest, was that I didn't want to get out of school. So I just stayed in school. It's kind of interesting now because, I have a son and he's always saying, well, I can't wait to get out of school or whatever. But I liked school. And so, I just stayed in school. I mean, and then I went to high school in Altadena at John Muir High. And of course, I've been back there visiting because what they've gone through with the fires. But then I went to UCLA and transferred to Santa Cruz. And then after that, I thought, well, I'll just keep going to school. And I went to graduate school at Yale. And, My mother used to say, she said, I never think he'll get that PhD, right? It's because I like being in school. And then when I got to the end, I thought, well, now what do I do, right? I mean, I can't really do anything else but teach. And so I've always I guess I just it was learning, studying, and thinking about how knowledge could make a difference was something I really found intriguing. And so I just stayed with it. And, I was very fortunate. Every step of the way, I was fortunate, lucky, and but also I prepared myself to receive luck. And so I think that's something that you have to do. You have to put yourself in a position. But it wasn't like I had some grand dream. I mean, my father had left, I think really left 8th grade. My mother did get a high school degree. She always claimed she went to college, but there was no proof of it. But,
she was smart.
Yeah, she was a Black woman who could have achieved a lot more had the times been different. But she was a beautician and business person. But, my sister went to college and, got a master's and whatever. But the whole education, we didn't come from a really educational family. Like I run into, brothers these days and said, oh, yeah, I'm such and such the third, like the first was something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, I just liked it. I majored in philosophy when I was at UCLA and ideas and thinking. Then I shifted over into history when I was at Yale. So I just really liked it, so.
You said something powerful. You said, I kind of got lucky, but I also kind of prepared myself to receive that luck. And I think a lot of times, people out there feel like they're down on their luck. But when you're so down on your luck sometimes that when luck shows up, you don't know how to recognize it. Mm-hmm. So what did you mean by that statement?
I just, I guess I tried to avoid self-destruction. I think that's an important thing. If you're not here, then you can't benefit. You know yourself how much I pain with the loss of my daughter. And, there's a lot of people out here that will take advantage of you and lead you down the wrong path. And you have to be able to say no to some things that are not good for you. So that's the first thing, saying no. But 2, saying yes to things that are good. Saying yes, we came from Chicago. I was born in Chicago. I came out here. My mother really brought us out here because I was having such difficulty in the schools in Chicago with violence and that sort of thing. I came out here and I was like completely blindsided in Pasadena, right? Because it was like, it was the first time I went to school with large numbers of white people. I mean, we had a couple of white people, in Parker School, but they were like people who were like, had a problem, right? And so they put them in the Black community, right? But then you have to be able to also change, I think, and adapt. So that's something that I've tried to do. I also had a strong mother who was always giving me the idea that I could do anything I wanted. And so that gave me the ability to follow my curiosity and to do things and not be too knocked down by obstacles. So I like studying. I went back to my high school reunion. I went out for football for a half a minute. And so the brothers who had been good came over and said, yeah, I remember you were always carrying books, And so, well, I did. I mean, I was carrying books even when I didn't necessarily need them for my classes. So, yeah, I think staying in the game, not being discouraged, is critical to receiving luck. And I guess just having a certain patience with yourself that everything is not going to come immediately is really important to being successful in ways that, are kind of surprising to you, you know. So, yeah, I think preparing yourself, not giving in to temptation that is not going to be good for you, and really loving yourself enough to do what you love to do. If you love to listen to jazz and nobody else does, go on and listen to it. You know, if you like studying rather than playing basketball, go on and do it. I mean, you know, you don't have to be like everybody else, which I think is a lot of pressure when you're in high school and junior high, to be like everybody else, to roll with the gang, to be with the crowd. I always was sort of a little bit of a loner. So, and I felt comfortable being by myself.
Yeah. So you liked school, you had the books on you, you end up at UCLA, big places, UCLA, Santa Cruz, then Yale. Yale's where you did your PhD.
Yes.
And it's in those moments that you decide, like, okay, I'm gonna be a historian. You've been called a cultural historian, a biographer, and a philosopher of identity.
But I fell into that too. I mean, in the sense that, you know, when I went to UCLA, I was there when the black, essentially the BSU moment, and BSU and Black Student Union and all that was going on. So I went there for, you know, the academics. But I found I did a lot of learning outside of the classroom in social organizations, in political organizations of students that was going on. So it wasn't like I planned to get into BSU, but I was there and, you know, somebody, hey, man, we having a meeting. Come on over to the meeting. And I go over to the meeting and I go, wow, all this stuff is going on here. So being open to it, a new path going. A lot of times when students go to college, I'm going to be this and I'm going to be that. And then they kind of resist reinventing themselves. So I think that's another key thing. I didn't plan. I went there in philosophy, but then I ended up studying political science, and I finished up in philosophy. When I went to Yale, I was planning to do something in philosophy, but I ended up being in American Studies. And American Studies, even though they had sold to me the idea I could do philosophy, the guy said, look, man, you can't really do philosophy up in here. You got to do English or history. And since I always missed the hidden meaning in English, you know how when they teach you English and they say, this is passage here, but there's a hidden meaning in there, and I could never find it. So I went with history. And I had a black professor at Yale who was the one who took me into history. His name was John Blassingame, and he would see me wandering around the Hall of Graduate Studies, and he'd say, so, Jeffrey, what you working on? You know, and I'd say some crazy stuff. And he'd say, okay. And he said, well, how about this? He'd pitch ideas to me. And that mentoring that he did to me was tremendous. And I'd say, he'd like, how about 19th century black poets? I said, no, man, I can't do that. You know, that's just too much for me, you know? So then he was the one that's like Alan Locke and Sterling Brown and those sorts of people who I didn't even really know about. I wasn't there looking for them. But he knew me. He said, yeah, you do philosophy. You could actually do well with Locke. And so this gets back to something that you've been actually promoting a great deal at UCSB, but not everybody has actually grabbed onto it, mentoring. Mentoring is just a key aspect to anybody's success, whether you sought it out, but particularly when people seek you out and say, hey, how you doing? We need more people who are willing to be mentors in ways that are helpful to young people.
Yeah. And even at a high caliber university level, it's very basic. You could be mentoring someone that has substance abuse issues on the streets. You could be mentoring a kid in 7th grade that's not doing well. You could be mentoring an elite college student with a brilliant mind that happens to be from the hood of Compton. You're mentoring them, and it's universal what you do. You approach them, and you recognize a gift, a talent, something that you know they're going to be good at. They're very articulate. Hey, I think you're going to be a good attorney one day. They're very quiet, but they absorb information, and they're constantly just gathering info, and they don't talk much, but when they talk, they say something brilliant. Hey, I think you'll be a good data scientist. I think you'll be someone that's in the background creating the next technology that's fair and equitable out there in the world, and creates a better world for us. So along the way, mentoring matters a lot. And, your story of your professor reminds me of my own professor at Berkeley when I was getting my PhD, Ron Takaki, the great historian.
Yes, I was a student of his at UCLA.
That's right.
Yeah, just a brilliant, brilliant man.
He told the story that he finished his PhD at Berkeley and he gets to UCLA. He would tell this story, and he's teaching at the time, because of the black students protesting. UCLA had created just one black studies course, and they asked him to teach it because his dissertation, his first book, was on slavery. And so he's there, and he tells this story where the students are in their leather jackets, and they're in the back, and one of them raises his hands and says, Professor Takaki, what are you going to teach us about our people? And of course, he had to kind of be modest and say, well, I can't teach you a whole lot, but I'll tell you kind of what I've learned over the years, studying slavery, and let's learn together. Let's learn together. And that's where his method of learning from the people, with the people, for the people came alive for me. And by the time I was a student under him, he would always tell me, stop writing so much theory and so many big words. Just tell the story of the people. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have him mentoring me, I think that I might either be some abstract teacher right now, just disconnected from community, or I wouldn't have made it through. And so the importance of mentoring is crucial out there. Like I said, whether you're mentoring little ones or all the way to university students that need our guidance, especially in our times today. It's critical times. I wondered, like, what is it?
I want to get to one thing I want to say about that Takaki story is that I noticed that he had, even in the class I had with him, which was like 230 people, he was very dialogic. He was always dialoguing, always asking us questions. I was always sitting in the back, so I couldn't actually answer. But sometimes people would get up and say things in the middle of the class. It was like a back and forth. It was a dialogue rather than him just lecturing you. He did a lot of lecturing because obviously that was the format. But the fact that he was saying, let's learn together, and that he reached out to you. And that is a kind of personality that has capaciousness. I'll throw out one of those words you want me to use.
Yeah, Pulitzer word right there. Capaciousness, folks.
Yeah, capacity, roominess, and welcoming you into the room.
Yeah.
And so much that we struggle with, I believe you would agree, on our campus, is people who are basically very selfish, almost narcissistic, and they don't create room for other people in their world. They just want their stuff. They've gotten rewarded. They've gotten grants. They're able to do their research. They teach as little as they can, right? And they're on this track. But then there are other people, and there are very few of them, and we really should try to start hiring in that category, who create roominess, who want to hear from students, who dialogue with students, who motivate students, and not just simply think it's all about them. And so that's what I lament, is people like John Blassingame or people like Ron Takaki, because there are not a whole lot of those right now, because the system rewards people who basically are self-aggrandizing and very goal-oriented and almost laser-like focus on self-promotion through their research. So
yeah, and it's important because if we're going to educate a new generation of critical thinkers that don't allow all this false information out there in the world. You pick it up anywhere on your phone, on TV, wherever you go, there's false information. And so you need to have a critical mind to navigate this world more than ever. AI, ChatGPT. I had an argument with ChatGPT the other day, man. It was trying to tell me, I'm like, no, that's not the truth. And it kept coming back and telling me, yes, it is. And we were fighting each other.
And so did you say your mama?
Pretty much.
You're stunning.
Pretty
I was
much.
like,
It's
wait a
like,
minute, was that IBM? I don't know.
Man, I just started. My wife was like, what are you doing? I was beating up the computer because ChatGPT was trying to tell me something that I know better.
Because those things are all just repeating what they've been fed.
Exactly.
So that's another important level of struggle now, is we have to feed artificial intelligence the knowledge that it needs, or else they'll basically be reflecting the canonical, stereotypical knowledge that, people in them little labs are feeding into them.
Exactly. So during these times, right, critical times we live in, the polarization of our society, man, the divisions, the way in which innocent people are just being attacked and snatched up on the streets. What does it mean to be a historian in our times today? Because, Takagi would always quote George Orwell to us, and he would say, the past is not even past. In fact, it's not even dead.
Yeah. Well, at some point, you struggle with the idea that a theory of that history is cyclical, and you never agree with that because everything's something new. But there are certain patterns. And I was thinking the other day that, I work on the 1920s and the Harlem Renaissance. And the Harlem Renaissance is thought of this great period of time where Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston and Harlem, and you could hang out in Harlem, and it was wonderful. But it's also taking place in the 1920s. And that period, 1920 to say 1929, they always call it the Roaring Twenties, how great it is. But it's actually one of the most conservative periods in our nation's history, and particularly when around the issue of immigration and xenophobia, which is basically the hatred for foreigners. And so 1920 and 24, they passed the National Origins Act 1 and 2, and they basically put quotas on who can come into the country. And so this whole idea that in America, it seems like we go through this period of time of welcoming people in, particularly during the 19th century, and, where we wanted people to come in and work to make money. But then somehow the people came, not just their labor. And as the people come and they bring their culture and they begin to transform America into the multicultural space that it really is, there's a reaction. And so basically in 1924, they excluded Japanese from migrating into the United States. And some people say that was the beginning of the process that led to Pearl Harbor, not justifying it. But the Japanese felt excluded from America and therefore put down in America. And they, of course, never done anything to America up to 1924. They'd basically been, sometimes said model. But there was this thing called the Yellow Peril, where everyone was obsessed with the Chinese and Japanese taking over the world. We kind of have a little bit that now, this obsession with China. So I think that when you're thinking about being a historian, what it does is it doesn't justify now because it happened before, but it does give you a context that it's not as out of character for America to be doing what it's doing right now. It's done it before. And so there's something in America. One historian wrote a book called The Paranoid Style in American Politics. I think it was Richard Hofstadter. And basically that there's paranoia that's a part of the America. It's so great here. Someone will take it from us. Whatever I have, they'll take it. So I better do something to keep that from happening, which is usually to repress those people who we see as the threatening people. But 9 times out of 10, it's not those people at all.
Yeah.
It's something else. But we would like to project onto some largely non-white threat. In those days, in the 20s, it was the Italians. It was the Lithuanians, Eastern Europeans. They were not considered white. They were considered a threat. And of course, people from China. And so obviously we had the KKK that was been revived in the 1910s and was very flourishing in the 1920s. We had the Tulsa bombing riot where they destroyed a black community that was the epitome of what you're supposed to be, making money, living in good homes, achieving business successes. They bombed it. So it's not that extreme that we're seeing the repression now. What the problem, I think, is how do we move America so that it's not as afraid, not as paranoid about opening up America, because we can't actually thrive as Americans without other people from other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, if America were an individual, a person, this person would be very emotionally dysregulated. To be self-regulated means to not operate on fear or paranoia, right? And yet, right. We teach people like, hey, stop being so paranoid, stop being so fearful, be inclusive, and just to sort of think the ways in which our country is so split right now in terms of like, these people are taking up too much of our space and resources, and then on the other side, thinking about the ways in which, we're trying to figure out how do we solve these issues without necessarily contributing to the polarization or also falling into this trap of hate, man, because if we start to hate on whatever side we're on, that's when we all lose the battle.
Yeah, and I'm really concerned about the way education has become such a territory for this conflict where, they're trying to take books out of the schools, taking books on diversity out of U.S. Naval Academy, cleansing the books in Florida. They have a big list of books that, you can't have in libraries, as if somehow or other having knowledge itself is dangerous. We're almost going back to before the Enlightenment, which of course Europeans always said was so great, reason, knowledge, and all that. We're kind of going back into a kind of Middle Ages where we don't want people to know. We don't want people to learn. And that's very dangerous because I think there are a number of threats with the earth, ecology, the environment, the climate. These things are advancing. And if we don't understand them and study them, it's going to affect all of us, regardless of our political beliefs. But
yeah.
Everything has been so politicized. So I hope that we can kind of maybe get back to education, which is really about learning about our world.
Yeah. Let's talk about history as a tool, an everyday tool. I was trained by a historian. My way of using history as an everyday tool, he trained me to do, oral history, talk to people, hear their personal histories. Mm-hmm. And then I use that. I mean, this podcast is essentially getting people's history, right? And telling it to the people. And that's exactly what, I was trained to do by my advisor. He wanted me to write about it, and I did. But doing these kinds of mediums is important too. Maybe people are hearing this in their 2-hour commute to work. Maybe people are watching it, young people are watching it in a stream, maybe on YouTube. So I'm wondering, for you, history as a tool, you talk a lot about history as not just the stale kind of past, but it has emotional and spiritual dimensions. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you ever use history to get through your own tough times.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tough right now for me. Like I said before, losing my daughter. I guess what I try to think about is that, a lot of people have lost a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Over the last 5 years, I mean, with the pandemic and everything, there's just been this almost collective sense of loss, almost like kind of what some people would say, like, during the Middle Ages, it was a period of the plague, and, a lot was lost. But it was out of the plague, it was out of that, they call it darkness, but that's kind of a racialized way of thinking of these periods of time. But out of the period of the plague came the Renaissance. So that it's often the case in history that tremendous negative setbacks for a civilization are then followed, if they can survive and persist through it, by a kind of enlightenment, a kind of awakening, a kind of a new beginning. So I try to think about that, loss can be the basis for something found. The Milton's Paradise Lost, and then this next book is Paradise Found. And so how do we create the new world out of the kind of conflict that we're having now? I think about people like Octavia Butler, who from science fiction writer, and basically wrote this piece called The Parable of the Sower, basically about how apocalyptic times, 2024, she was writing about it in the 90s and, singing about now, how is that like the kind of destruction someone will come that will actually bring us together again. And so sometimes looking back and seeing that, again, that pattern of the down, it's almost like the stock market. It goes really down and then it comes back up. So how do we lay the groundwork now in these times when things seem very challenging for some sort of upswing? How do we build the building blocks for that? So one of the things I've been doing, and intimately, is with the Jeffries Jazz Coffee House that I started. I started that because I was teaching a course on the history of jazz, and students at UCSB didn't have an experience of listening to live jazz. And so the Chancellor Yang gave me the opportunity to utilize some spaces, and I basically brought in quite professional musicians in the Santa Barbara area that most people don't even know about, who would come and play for the students, and again, dialogue with them. Like one of my main friends, Morgan Field Burnett, Larry Edwards, he plays a harmonica, he plays a Chicago-style electric blues jazz, but then he talks to the students, and they talk to him. And so he talks about what it was like in Chicago and what was it like under the blues. And so, it gives them a sense of reality they don't know anything about, but also about how do you use that strength that comes from the blues, which is about, the negative. You're talking about negative, loss, love, loss, freedom, those sorts of things, but you're turning it into an art form that can make you feel better when you're in the midst of struggle. And I think hip-hop does some of that. I think some country western music does that. That you face the pain, but then somehow or other it has a cathartic effect and you feel better and you're able to move on.
Yeah. I've seen your jazz coffee house come to life many times in the community there, right next to UC Santa Barbara. And I've witnessed students show up and they're looking down. They're tired, they're stressed, they're broke, they're eating cup of noodles, soup, and you have a beautiful meal there set up for them, you got tacos sometimes, you got all kinds, you got great chicken, you got all kinds of stuff you're serving, so, fulfilling their soul and their spirit and their bodies, and they're showing up, looking down, and you're seeing them walk on the street, and then there's music and light and community coming out of this building, and they're just curious looking in there. And all of a sudden, we're there welcoming, hey, come on in, go join the other students. And they get in there, and all races of students show up. And then the same student that was kind of looking down outside, kind of trying to figure out what's going on, you see them eating, and like 20 minutes later, they're like bobbing their heads to the jazz music. 20 minutes after that, they're on the dance floor,
Right.
It's like, and there's something to say about the way in which sometimes we're in these professional spaces, including the university, where you feel like a disconnection, where you feel like you don't have community, where you're getting a big degree, but you're still lost. And you provide a sense of belonging and being found. How do you think that kind of model will help us in the future as we're facing difficult times today? How does that model help us? Because this helped the local community at UCSB.
Yeah, I think it's sort of funny you're mentioning about the history. And I was thinking about when I was growing up and living in Pasadena, probably one of the first coffee houses I went to was downtown in Pasadena on Green Street, where there would be people there drinking coffee. Before, the Starbucks and all that kind of thing was kind of odd to be drinking coffee, not in the morning. People would be hanging out and maybe reading some poetry or something like that. Fast forward to when I was at Yale, the story was I got there late, and I didn't have a place in the Hall of Graduate Studies. And so I had a fight with my mother because she didn't want me to go to Yale. She wanted me to go somewhere local, but that was the only school I got into. So I would dally. I thought I was going to take my car. She took my car away. I went anyway, right? So I got there, and I couldn't live in an apartment.
Wait, hold on real quick. What kind of car did you have?
I had a Volvo.
Okay.
Yeah. Before they were, upper middle class, right? It was just a little old Volvo, And so I got there, had no car, didn't have a space in the graduate. So they said, oh, well, there's this black dorm up at the Divinity School. So this is a period of time when, black people wanted to have their own separate spheres and stuff in these schools. So they had a black dorm. They had small ones up at Divinity School. And they said, it's not filled. So I said, okay. So I went up there. And I was in the Divinity School door, which was incredible, right? I mean, at first they didn't accept me because they thought I was a CIA plant, because I wasn't particularly religious. But then after a while, they said, oh, well, he's from California, so he's too crazy to be in the CIA or something like that, right? So then, we'd hang out. But they had the coffee houses because they used the coffee house. The church is in New Haven, would have coffee houses in the evening for the kids because it was an outreach of their spiritual mission. They realized they weren't reaching the young people as much as they would.
Were these black churches?
Yes, these are black churches in New Haven.
And they had coffee houses for targeted for black students.
Yeah, the black church would say, okay, on Wednesdays, we're going to have a place, either in the basement of the church or someplace else. We'll invite the kids in. We'll give them food. We'll have some people come and play conga drums or whatever. And you just kind of hang out, and then you have some entertainment. You also use it as an opportunity to spread your ministry, right? You sort of try to get them to not be self-destructive, but then play music and kind of use music. So that was really the model that I had, that I witnessed. That then when I saw, okay, there's this sort of beat kind of coffee house, but then there's the community-enhancing kind of coffee house. So that kind of brought that through. And I think that's back to your thing about mentoring. They were mentoring me on how to be an academic who wasn't just an academic, who reaches beyond the people who are in the school. Because many of these, people come in the coffee house. We're in New Haven schools. And, New Haven is not a great place for, it's Yale is there, but the town and gown thing is really wide. And, a lot of people in New Haven hate Yale. So, there's a lot of tensions around that. But they still bridge that gap. Black divinity students who were connected to the black churches created these coffee houses that, were places of community in the community. And a new community was formed in the coffee house, which was people in school and whatever. So that kind of gave me the model for, like, okay, I didn't really think about it until just now, but that was a major thing when I started saying, okay, I'll bring jazz. And what will I bring? I'll have chicken. I'll have fried chicken. So we'd always have fried chicken because the women in the church would always fix food. So we didn't have to buy food. And so there's that kind of church collective work together. Of course, now I have to pay for it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And but it's worth the investment. It's worth
because this man downtown, I think one of the few black-owned restaurants in Santa Barbara, Soul Bites, I always have him fix it because he'll fix it with the chicken and the greens and the macaroni and cheese, like the old ways, you know.
I've tasted it. It's delicious.
Yeah.
But also you've had tacos there, so you're multicultural,
yeah.
man.
No, I mean, I
You've had
switch
salsa
up.
bands there too.
Yeah, I switch up. Yeah, because food is a form of cosmopolitanism, right? It teaches us to break bread, have community with people who are not like us.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what we need more of, connecting with people that are not like us rather than creating those divisions. Speaking of music, I know, and you mentioned your daughter, Cassandra, and I know, and so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I know that she was an incredible musician, and I wonder, like, how do you carry her legacy forward?
Yeah, I think that I try to think about that there are a lot of other young people who are struggling. I think that one of the things we don't acknowledge is how much mental health has become, in many ways, the number one issue in schools and colleges today. And I think about the fact, one of the most powerful things I think that the Black students at UCSB did was make demands to have, Black-oriented mental health professionals, right? And one of the things that happened is, so when they hired those people, they became the most popular mental health providers on campus for all the students, right? And then expanding that, and just thinking about how do we construct an educational system for the future that is more sensitive to the mental health challenges of students so they feel included. We talk a lot about inclusion, and it's racial, but it's also, neurodivergent, different ways of thinking and feeling about things, different ways of maybe reacting to things that are triggering in ways that, we don't think are triggering for us. Getting away from the fact that there's a normalcy to really a real diversity that's not just simply based on race and gender and sexuality. I mean, those are certainly very important. But I think that's one of the things that I really think more and more about is it's like mental health is kind of an add-on.
Yes.
And it's not really a fundamental rethinking about how people learn and think and react to things.
That's the emotional side of history that you're very much a pioneer of understanding what was going on emotionally there.
Yeah, and also listening. I think one thing that, I regret is how much I talked and not listened. And I think students have this all the time. Professors, teachers are always talking into them and not actually asking them, well, how are you feeling today? Well, how did this material come over to you? Did you understand what was being told you or not? And then giving them time, since they're usually surprised when anyone actually asks their opinion, to really allow students to speak their truth and say it how they experience it. I think that's the biggest lesson that I try. I mean, it's still hard because you're programmed to be producing knowledge and not seeing that knowledge is something to be constructed by students with you.
Yeah. I think that, with authority, right, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a politician, right, you think you have all the solutions, so you're just talking at people. But you mentioned that your lesson, is, hey, you know what, I should be listening more. And then passing that on to others. Like, hey, we need to listen to people more.
And also how you listen, because, you can be listening just so that you can make your next comment. That's what I see in many of the things on TV now, MSNBC or Fox News. Everybody's listening just to be able to make their next counterpoint instead of really thinking, wow, I never thought about it that way. Maybe they were acting out of something that I didn't consider. We don't really have much space for that in our public discourse, or maybe even in schools. I mean, I look back on, my son just graduated from Santa Barbara High,
Yeah,
and
congratulations.
yeah, well, yeah, I'm really happy about that, but I also noticed like what a journey it's been, because it seems like a lot of education now is about behavior modification and control,
Yeah.
and measures that essentially create behaviors, and then if the student resists the control, they're punished in the grade.
Yeah.
So like you can actually know a subject really well and be able to pass an exam, but if you haven't put in all those assignments all along the way, you won't get a top grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, what is it about our need to control in the process of educating that needs to be thought?
You've studied people that really were trying to liberate their soul, their mind, whether it's the 1920s before. And you've also written books for publics about Black history for young people, right? So you've studied individuals that have made a difference in liberating mind, body, and soul. And so I wonder, what do you tell a young person that's out there struggling, listening, and struggling in life, and it's like, man, I don't have hope for the future. My family's broke. Like things are happening in the country. It's crazy. What do you tell them now that you have this knowledge as a historian about liberating their mind, body, soul?
Well, yeah, mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit. That's what Denzel Washington says in those Equalizer movies, right? Mind, body, spirit, right? I mean, I think that's the triumvirate that we definitely need to have. So there's this real debate I've been listening to among influencers who are trying to influence careerism. And it's the tension between follow your passion or follow your talent, right? And a lot of things people are criticizing, well, if you follow your passion, but you're not talented in it, then you're kind of lost. So I've been thinking about that. Like, most young people have a talent. Let's just go with that for a minute. They have a talent. They have something they can do that makes them stand out. And I think they should actually start trying to think about that. Like, what is it that I have as an ability or a capacity or an insight or a gift that I can use to advance myself, or that I can just even cultivate as a private hobby while I'm doing this other stuff for the man, as they used to say. I got to do this for the man. I got to do this for my parents. I got to do this for the school to essentially, it's like the price of doing business is I've got to give something to that system, person, or authority. But can I have something that I nurture and curate for myself that's based on something I can do, and I know I can do it well? If it's playing chess well, if it's fixing cars well, if it's singing, if it's essentially social. There's a number of young people who are very endowed with great social intelligence, but that's not validated often by the educational system. There's no class you go to and you get an A or a B as in terms of whether you're a good socializer. But when you get to the highest level, you're in a business situation, you're running a company, your ability to get people together and feel a sense of commonality and for a certain purpose actually is incredible value. It's the difference between you being just a person working there to becoming the CEO. It's even things when you think about gang behavior, which I know is really negative, right? But sometimes people in gangs and gang leaders actually have a great deal of social intelligence. They know how to bring people together. They know how to manage people who are on the fringe. How can those skills be translated into something more positive?
Yeah.
And not been looked down on
Yeah.
because, I was in a gang. Well, okay, but what is this transferable skills in a positive way that can be taken from that experience into a more rewarding situation?
Yeah, people talk about IQ versus EQ, right? And IQ, we know what IQ is your so-called intelligence, but EQ, that's the emotional quotient.
Right.
And that one's like, that's what you're talking about. Are you able to be a social architect? How well do you listen to people? How well do you bring groups together, build peace? That kind of emotional intelligence is important in our world. All right, Dr. Stewart, it has been a wonderful conversation. You've given us some great insight on the history you've studied and then how to apply it in our everyday lives in the real world today through the crises that we're living in. And also, I like the idea of preparing for when times get better in our communities, in our country, amongst ourselves as individuals. A lot of times we're not prepared for hard times, and you have that historical understanding that there's always going to be hard times, and it's what you do with those hard times to build better times in the future that matters. So I'm going to ask you my Real with Rios question for today, and that is, tell us about something small, something ordinary that brings you peace, joy, or grounding.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I visited my home in Altadena a couple of weeks ago, and it's one of the few that didn't burn down. And I remember growing up that my father would tend to these roses in the backyard. And it was interesting to me because he wasn't like he came from an agricultural background, rural, he came from cities, but he would curate these roses, in the backyard. And so now I'm finding that I'm actually very drawn to flowers. I've not really been a particular big flower person. I used to use flowers usually to make up with a girlfriend after I'd done something wrong. But now, I find that, getting flowers, there's a great variety of places you can get flowers. If people stand on the street, they have flowers. I like that because you kind of interact with people or vons or whatever. And you bring them home and you put them in a vase and put some water and you put that little stuff in there that makes them live a few more days. And you put it up, and there's just something about that really makes me feel good now. Of course, that's obviously associated with, funerals and falls and all that. I kind of got into that a little bit because of that. But I do find that it does lift my mood. And that flowers also give you this idea of kind of like that, life is not unlimited, but while you're there, you're shining, you're beautiful, there's an upliftingness to life that seize that moment. Be a bright, shining flower then, even though you know that cut flower after some point is going to, die.
That's beautiful. The Aztecs, the whole civilization was built around flowers and the meaning of flowers, and poetry, philosophy, art was based on flowers. And there's a song I want to share with you. Actually, I wasn't planning this, but since you mentioned it, it's been a powerful moment for me being here with you. I want to share it, and it says, "Chequiyewa Xochitl, Chequiyewa Panoyolo, Papa mi mitzla sotla, Papa mi nitzla sotla, in Tlaneshli Noyolo." And in Spanish, that's Nahuatl, and it's cuida esta flor, cuídala en tu corazón, porque te quiero del fondo de mi corazón. So it's like, take care of this flower, take care of it in the depth of your heart, because I love you from the depth of my heart. And the Aztecs, their philosophy also was very much based on this idea of En Lankesh, you are my other me. And then there's a little recital you go through, if I harm you, I harm me.
Right.
And so it's like, you are my other me. And so like, whether you're talking interpersonally with like a romantic partner, family, or someone in society. You're seeing them as your other you. So how could you harm that person if they're your other you? So thank you for sharing about the flowers. It resonated with me, and it reminded me of that philosophy, and maybe those flowers, that carry all that deeper meaning that you stand for, the history, the liberation, the overcoming the tough times, the legacy,
and the flowering of the people.
And the flowering of the people.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's really what we want.
That's
we want
right.
the flowering of America, and we want the flowering of the people in it.
That's right. Dr. Jeffrey Stewart, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for sharing your mind, your journey, and your spirit with us today. You reminded us that history isn't just about the past. It's about the possibility of who we can become as individuals and as a nation. And to all our listeners, may your curiosity be liberating, may your voice be rooted, and may your soul stay strong. This is Real with Rios, Sueños to Success. Until next time, take care.